Fear Not, Episode 33. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Before the show begins, I just want to let everybody know that many of the guests have donated current copies of their books, and we'll be giving them away for free. If you'd like an opportunity to win one of these books, visit the giveaways page at livingbeyondyourfears.com. Each competition only lasts 7 days, and it's totally free to enter, so do it today. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Jenni Catron. Welcome, Jenni. How are you today?
Billy, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Are you ready to fear not today?
Well, yes, let's dive in.
Jenni is a leadership coach, writer, and speaker. Her passion is to lead well and to inspire, equip, and encourage others to do the same. Jenni is the author of Clout, Discover and Unleash Your God-Given Influence, as well as her most recent book, The 4 Dimensions of Extraordinary Leadership, The Power of Leading from Your Heart, Soul, Mind, and Strength. She loves a fabulous cup of tea, great books, learning the game of tennis, and hiking the West Coast with her husband. Jenni, can you take a few moments to fill in the gaps and maybe give us a brief glimpse of your personal life as well?
Sure. I love all things leadership. I call myself a self-proclaimed leadership junkie, and that's only because of a passion to figure out how to use our influence well. And so many of us find ourselves in places of influence and responsibilities, and then deal with all the fears I'm sure we'll talk about today of the things that trip us up and hold us back. And so it became kind of a personal quest for me to figure out how to do leadership well. So that's kind of at the front of everything that I do. And I've worked in the music business for a number of years, worked at a record label in Nashville, did marketing and brand development for about 9 years there. And I spent about 12 years in executive leadership at 2 different large churches, helping oversee the operations and the staff development of a large staff team. And most recently launched my own business consulting and working with nonprofits and some small businesses on leadership development, organizational health, all that kind of fun stuff. And my husband and I have been married for 18 years next month. We never had children of our own, only the 4-legged furry variety. But I am Aunt Jenni to some amazing kids, and that kind of rounds out our life. That's what life looks like right now.
Sounds amazing, and thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Jenni, would you share with us one of the biggest fears that you've had to face?
Yeah, I think, when we talked about this ahead of time a bit, I feel like I could list like a sheet full of fears, but I think what it really boils down to for me is just kind of this repeated fear of not being enough. And I think a lot of us really face that, this just, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not smart enough. It's like every time we find ourselves in new circumstances, there's just that fear of, can I do it? Am I enough? And, this showed up for me in every job change that I've had, or, I'm an author, so I've released several books. And, there is just this gripping fear when you've spent months putting your heart on the pages of a book, and then it's out there for everybody to see. And you think, who am I? Am I qualified to do this? Who's going to believe me? And so I find myself, kind of repeatedly hitting that hurdle of, Am I enough? Am I capable enough? Am I smart enough? And I think all of us could fill in that blank. And that seems to be the overarching fear that I find myself facing a lot.
So what do you do to overcome that fear when you're confronted with it?
Yeah. I think I've learned about myself. I'm an introvert by nature, and I know that when I start my day with some quiet time, with some scripture reading. I'm a Christian, so prayer and scripture are important for just kind of grounding me. And I often talk about I need to make sure that whatever fear I'm facing, I need to replace that with truth, because I think a lot of times we get to the bottom, when we really start to think about our fears. I don't know if you or the listeners are like this, but a lot of times I try to ignore my fear, and just kind of stuff it somewhere out of the way and just keep charging forward and keep moving forward. And the reality is we really need to actually face that fear. And then for me, it's looking at it and going, okay, I'm afraid of this person rejecting an idea, or I'm afraid of, doing an amazing presentation in this particular meeting. And when I stop and I go, okay, what's actually true? What's true is that I'm completely prepared for this meeting. I've spent the time to be prepared. I've done my research. My notes are thorough. So it's like getting really specific as we look at a fear that we're facing and say, okay, what's actually true? And for me, starting my day in prayer or scripture reading helps me get kind of those foundations of truth of what does God think about me? What do I believe is true based on, a foundation of faith for me? Reminding myself of that truth and just keeping inspirational messages around me is really important for me, especially in starting my day. I find if I start my days that way, it really makes a radical difference in being able to engage the fears as they hit me.
Is there a particular scripture that you use quite often, or one of your favorites that really empower you?
Yeah. So here's what I did a study on this actually in scripture when I was writing my book Clout. Because I had often heard, the scripture, there are numerous places in scripture where God says, don't be afraid. And I would actually just start to feel some shame or guilt whenever I felt afraid, because I was like, well, scripture teaches don't be afraid. And so I went and I did a study on this. And what was fascinating to me is that throughout scripture, both Old and New Testament, wherever God told people to not be afraid, he followed it with a promise. So like in Genesis, when he's talking to Abraham, he says, don't be afraid, Abram, I'm your shield, your great reward. And so I began to go through different points of scripture, and he says, don't be afraid, God has heard you, or don't be afraid, I'm with you. And that really flipped things for me, in that it's not just don't be afraid, figure it out, suck it up, find a way. It was don't be afraid, I'm with you. There was always a promise from God on the other side of that. And so rather than one particular scripture, it really became that theme that I've seen throughout scripture, of that wherever God says don't be afraid, he makes a promise of his provision and his willing, that he's with us in that fear. And that's become really powerful to me.
Jenni, do you have any resources that you could possibly share with us that we could implement into our own journeys in overcoming fear?
Sure. There's a couple that have been powerful to me, in different seasons of fear. There's a book called Fearless by Max Lucado. That one, again, he's a Christian teacher and pastor. And so, for those of faith, Fearless is a really powerful one. There's also a book by Susan Jeffers called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I kind of love the power of that statement. And, and that book kind of unpacks that a little bit of, yep, feel the fear, face the fear, and keep moving forward. So there's just a little bit of like, you've got this, keep going kind of attitude in that one, but it's well researched and thoughtful. So those are the two that I think have been really helpful for me.
Great. And thank you for sharing. Are you ready for the speed round?
Absolutely.
What individual that's either fiction or real has made the most impact on your life?
I would have to say my grandmother. I called her Nanny. And I spent a lot of time as a kid growing up with her. So, she just, Nanny just invested in me, the perfect grandmother kind of image of somebody who doted on you, took care of you, gave you good instruction. And I just spent a lot of time with her as a child. And so she really shaped me in some meaningful ways.
And if you could instantly change one thing in the world, what would that be?
Oh, that's so hard because you feel like there's just so many things. But something I've always had a passion for is orphaned children. Just the idea of kids without a loving family. That's always been a burden of mine. And I work with a nonprofit that, focuses on foster children here in the US. And so I would say that would probably, if I had to pick one, I think orphaned kids that don't have a family unit they're thriving in, that would be a big passion for me. I'd love to not see any kids without a loving home.
What's your biggest weakness?
Oh gosh. I I think I would say that I take everything too serious and I have difficulty having fun, which sounds like one of those, weaknesses that sounds like a strength, but really truly it's actually like something that hinders me from really enjoying life, because I'm always a little anxious and keyed up.
What's your biggest strength?
My biggest strength is I get stuff done. Like I'm just somebody who can see a big goal, see a big vision or big idea, and I can break it down into meaningful steps and lead a team to get it done. So I just one of those people who can find a way to get stuff done.
And if you could only have one book, what book would that be?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'd have to say the Bible. Can I do a second one too? Because that feels like the
Sure.
the easy answer. I think the other one I would do is John Maxwell's The 21 Most Powerful Minutes in a Leader's Day. That one's been out for years, but it's a really fascinating book that kind of looks at different leaders throughout Scripture and history. It's really, really a fantastic book.
And do you have a favorite sound?
I think I would say quiet. Just when the house is quiet and I've just got space to think and dream and listen. I love quiet.
And Jenni, if anyone would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, my website is jennicatron.com, JenniCatron.com. And you can go there. My business site is getforesight.com. So that's another great resource. And then I'm Jenni Catron on all social media. So would love to connect with anybody. I try to be super responsive. So please feel free to reach out.
And what parting advice would you like to leave with us today?
I think I would tell you, I think all of us have a unique opportunity to influence the world. I think we were made to influence the world in a way that no one else can. And so I would just encourage everybody who's listening, pay attention to that, pay attention to the sphere of influence that you have, and just tackle those fears so that you can run boldly into the things that you're designed to do.
That's really great advice, and thank you. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, Jenni. It's been really great having you here, and thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much, Billy. I appreciate it. And thank you to all of you that listen and are a part of this community.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.